And this is WMNF from WMNF Tampa. This is True Talk with Ahmed and Samar. On today's program, we're going to be speaking about the ceasefire, double ceasefire. Is it going to hold? And how will those further negotiations that are supposed to start tomorrow in Pakistan, are they going to lead to a lasting treaty or some sort of peace? It's not necessarily a treaty, but a longer lasting peace between the United States and Iran. And there are questions if Israel is trying to sabotage that peace deal. So Summer and I will be speaking about that, as well as the continued bombardment of Lebanon in Beirut. What's happening there? They've had the highest number of deaths in a single day yesterday. That and maybe your phone calls. This is True Talk on WMNF. We'll be right back.
شبابي وينك الو يا الغالي وين الو الو سلم لي عالحبيبة عايش بالناس غريبة مش عارف وكري وين الو 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 يا عمري وينك الو يا شبابي وينك الو يا الغالي وين الو.
And Samar Jarrah and I are back. That was Alo Alo from Balti, Tunisian rapper. You can find him on YouTube. Samar, were you surprised by the ceasefire? You messaged me on, was it Tuesday, saying, Ahmed, do you think he's going to go through with it or not? Because earlier that day, Trump was threatening to wipe out an entire civilization tonight. And you said you don't think he's going to do anything. He's going to back off. He's just bluffing. You were right. Why were you so sure?
I had a feeling that he was doing two things. One is manipulating the market, and that's something like we can talk about it later. But because I felt that he wanted a way out, and that was the only way to do it, is to show that he's going to go in with insinuating that it could be a nuclear bomb. It's not like the average bombing of Baghdad or of Afghanistan or what they have been doing so far in Iran, that he is really contemplating something very dangerous. And I knew that the reaction, and from the reaction that I have seen from world leaders and from people from MAGA, his own supporters, from many congressmen and women, of course, on the Democratic side, except for the former Congresswoman Marjorie Greene, that they are calling for impeachment. And then the threats that Tehran put forward, that they're going to destroy the basically the bloodline of the Gulf states, which is water desalination, that they will go out and destroy refineries as well as oil fields. So it was like doomsday, because if anything happens of what Iran threatened or what the president was contemplating, it means a disaster for the whole world, and it doesn't mean only for the region. So why would he be doing that? Where is the elders in this country, the lawyers, the councils that give him counsel, what is legal and what is illegal? So I felt that he was throwing a bait and waiting for somebody to catch it, to find like some sort of way out for him. And it happened. And it's funny, Ahmed, it happened through the Prime Minister of Pakistan. And the Prime Minister of Pakistan obviously got a tweet or a message from the handlers of Trump, and they forgot to erase the title of it, which said, for the Prime Minister of Pakistan X account. And the Prime Minister of Pakistan posted it Then somebody told him, obviously, that, oops, you should have removed that line. So he deleted it and then reposted without that headline. But of course, people took screenshots. So that's why I sent you a couple of hours before and I said, Ahmed, there is going to be a ceasefire. He's not going to do it. And an hour and a half before 8 o'clock p.m. in the US, it happened. So I guess it
Well, I
will
mean,
be.
you were right on that, but you didn't place any bets on any of the prediction markets like Poly Market or
No, I did not.
the people were betting on that, right?
But
They have all
people,
these markets now that you can legally bet on world events, when peace would happen and things like that. And now the New York Times just 2 days ago had reported how Trump took the U.S. to war with Iran. And all along, we've been saying all along that it was Israel pushing for this and Netanyahu. But, you had all these publications, including even Rachel Maddow on MSNBC. Do you remember that 20-minute, monologue where she's basically saying that this is all because of the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and others that are pushing for this? While they might have, played a role, but in that, many of even some leftist outlets were trying to simply ignore the fact that it was really Israel that was pushing for this war. And that's basically what the New York Times concluded, that in the reporting that Netanyahu came to the United States. Oh, I have to sneeze. That's not good when you have to be on air. Um, when you're on air live, but he came and he was taken to the Situation Room, which usually world leaders are. This is for Americans, for the national security team. You don't let them in, the Situation Room. And he was basically negotiating, and Netanyahu, even there, talked about his placement in the Situation Room, that he was kind of front and center, not off to the side, almost like he was across the table from President Trump, meaning like he's his equal. Hello, you're coming to the United States. You're a visiting leader. You're not in charge of this country. And he was there trying to convince him that this is the time to, take on Iran, and overpromised about, once they take out the Ayatollah, it will all start collapsing. There'll be a regime change. And none of his advisors actually really pushed back, even the ones that were very skeptical that that Iran would not collapse, there would not be a regime change. And that was a conclusion from a meeting following the next day, where the intelligence and the CIA basically said, no, it's not it's not possible. But they didn't really push back. Rubio was in the room and he didn't say much about it. So what's the point? I think his chief of staff, Susie, had said, well, she's concerned about how, getting it, into another forever war and how that would impact the polling. But some of these advisors that are supposed to be there to push back, and you're saying, where are the elders in the room? They were not pushing back. And, he eventually just, went for it, thinking that, after Venezuela, somehow the U.S. military is unstoppable and that this would be another Venezuela thing. And obviously it wasn't. And he was reassured, or Netanyahu lied to Trump and minimized, said, no, they're not going to be able to, close the Strait of Hormuz, and they're not going to attack your allies in the Gulf countries. Everything Netanyahu promised turned out to be false. And again, this is Netanyahu once again pushing and dragging the United States into this war. And who gets to suffer the most from it? It's the United States. It's not Netanyahu. It's not Israel that, is paying the heavier price. And it's all using our tax dollars. Imagine whether it's the bombs and the missiles or, the interceptors that are being used, whether by the United States or by Israel, it's all being paid by our tax dollars. So we're footing the bill. We're paying the price for this. And now we're even more hated in the region. And, people are trying to say and dismiss and say, well, Iran, they're chanting death to America and they deserve all this. Do you think by bombing them that somehow you're going to win over the people of Iran? And you remember early on all these pundits and even the president himself, saying that the Iran regime is attacking and killing their own people, and we have to liberate and free these people, or they're doing it somehow for the people. But you're bombing and killing the very same people that you're trying to say that you're saving. So people were not buying that, and I think the charade is up. And of course, even in America, the war was very unpopular, even among Republicans and among MAGA. And I think that added a lot of pressure on Trump to stop and to look for a way out. He's been wanting to get out of this war for a long time, but he didn't have a way out without looking like completely humiliated.
Ahmed, I read that article several times, and I even translated parts of it to the Arabic language. And I'm hoping in a couple of years, when there is presidential elections, whether Vance is running, Rubio is running, that they will go back to that moment, because both of them in the following day meeting, expressed their honest opinion that it's not going to work, and the system will not collapse, and the regime will not change, and like a more democratic, vibrant, pro-America power will emerge after the assassination of the Ayatollah. That when really Trump looked at them, they said their honest opinion, and then they looked at him and they said, we will let you make the decision, and meaning that they will support him. But and even the council, and even Susan was quiet the whole time, while she was quiet the whole time, and then she said, I'll let you make the decision. So this is something that we have to study many years later down the road, because they could have expressed their forceful opinion. They dumped it all on him because I think they fear his retaliation. And it's a very telling moment.
But I mean, yes, they do fear his retaliation, and they don't want to get on his bad side. But I think the one that was vocally against it was J.D. Vance. But he said at the end, I'm going to support your decision anyway. So it's like, if you have any type of decency or integrity, and you see somebody that's the president that you're serving is going to wipe out and is threatening to wipe out, just the idea of threatening to wipe out a civilization, what does that mean? I mean, this even goes beyond what Hitler was saying. At least Hitler, as bad as he is, and we hate to even invoke any of this, because right away people are going to attack. The Nazis, they hid. They didn't use that kind of rhetoric. We're going to wipe people out, and they were trying to somewhat hide their crime. They weren't bragging about it. Yes, they're criminal. They're Nazis. They're evil, but they're trying to, hide it, not make these crazy threats about wiping out a civilization. And of course, how do you wipe out a civilization in this day and age? Tonight, in one night, right away, people start thinking nuclear weapons, and that was circulating and going around. So it's highly irresponsible. But to my point, if you're serving under somebody that says that, if you have any type of integrity, you would threaten to resign, to say, I'm leaving. I'm not going to be a part of this. You do this and I'm out. You need to stop it now. That's the kind of leadership that you need to have in place, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. But how is it that somebody is going to do something so egregious, so evil, or even threaten with it, and then say, well, I'm going to support you anyway? What are you talking about? So this is why people have been saying that this Iran attack is basically a turning point. One, because the United States, the biggest superpower in the world, went up against Iran, that's sanctioned, that is surrounded, that's seized, and they basically bombarded them for 5 weeks, and at the end, Iran survived, and they were able to basically impact the world economy by closing the Strait of Hormuz. And that's basically the whole arrangement with the world. The reason why the world, this world order that exists, that America is basically the leader of this world order, that people trust the United States, that they have the power, that they can police things, that they will keep their shipping lanes open, that oil will flow and energy. And a lot of times they just outsource that to the United States to keep it. And that's one of the biggest, the whole agreement with Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states is that, hey, sell your oil in dollars and we will protect your institutions, we'll protect your families, we'll protect your oil, and the oil will keep flowing. And they were not able, in this situation, they were not able, regardless of what they did, the United States was not able to open the Strait of Hormuz. And at the end, they caved to the demands of Iran. That changes, the whole order in the world. And now people are going to start looking for other world powers to be able to guarantee their safety or what's happening with the Strait of Hormuz. And now out of this, yes, Iran has been, their infrastructure, a lot of it has been destroyed. However, they're seen as coming out as a winner because now they're actually in charge of the Strait of Hormuz and they get to decide who goes in and who goes out. So this is changing things. And I think it really lowered the United States. The United States is less in power and leading the world after this Iran thing, the war in Iran, than before. They're worse off. It would have been better for them to actually never attack Iran to begin with, because now they're looking like, well, they couldn't contain Iran. They couldn't achieve their goals. None of their goals were achieved. So, Samar, I guess our guest is joining us. We want to switch and talk about Lebanon. So go ahead and
Well, as we speak,
introduce her.
or like you and I were exchanging all these messages, but yesterday was a very, very difficult day for Lebanon because the Israel 50 airplanes bombed the heart of the capital of Lebanon, Beirut. And I think that death toll so far 300 people and maybe thousands of injured people. But I'm really happy that I was able to get Professor Merily Rebiz, and you can excuse me, Professor, if I'm mispronouncing your name, but she is chair of Middle East Studies at the Dickinson College, but she's also an expert on Lebanon, speaks Arabic, French, and English. Her most recent book is called Hezbollah in International Law, but she's also the author of Gendering Civil War, Francophone Women's Writing in Lebanon. She writes extensively about Lebanon, the Middle East, feminism and issues, but of course she also is a professor of international law. And Professor, just in case, because, if you watch US mainstream media, you'd think nothing's going on except Hormuz, Trump, and Iran. But obviously there has been a catastrophe that befell Lebanon. Can you brief our listeners on what just happened?
First, thank you for having me, and my prayers and thoughts are with our people in the Middle East, specifically all the civilians from Iran to Lebanon, Palestine. As we know, targeting civilian is forbidden and unlawful under international law. But Lebanon, unfortunately, is not mentioned at all in any of the major news outlets in the United States. The major focus is on Iran, Israel, and the United States. It's as if Lebanon does not exist. Lebanon geographically is a small country, but it's a mighty country. And right now, what we're witnessing is actually a war between Iran and Israel over who gets to control the territory of Lebanon, knowing that the Lebanese people have made it, and the Lebanese state have made it clear and loudly clear that we are a sovereign state and we do not have Israel or United States or Iran speak for us. Unfortunately, news outlets are not reporting on this. They keep reporting on how Iran is speaking for Lebanon and how Israel wants to occupy Lebanon. And of course, we reject as Lebanese people, as a sovereign people and a sovereign state, we reject all of this. What happened yesterday was simply, in 2 words, war crimes. Israelis flew over Lebanon and took pride in attacking Lebanon. In 10 minutes, they dropped over 160 bombs that were paid by US dollars, funded by us in the United States. In an indiscriminate way. They bombed civilians, infrastructure, targeting elderlies, women, children, people in their homes, in their daycares, in their work. They targeted ambulances. And of course, the excuse that Israel has always used is that they're hiding terrorists. They are terrorists. Now, we've got news to this excuse. When we look at Gaza, the world should be ashamed of what happened in Gaza. An ongoing genocide against the Palestinian people right in front of our eyes. And Gaza is actually what opened the door and emboldened Israel to continue with its massacres against the civilians, because not only it normalized international lawlessness, but also it normalized open racism and hatred against Arab and Muslims in that part of the world. In other words, Israel's action turned every Arab and every Muslim into a possible target under the excuse that we're all terrorists. Now, let me ask you this. How can we speak of terrorism of 17,000 children in Palestine and Gaza who were killed? How can we speak of terrorists in over 140 children in Lebanon? Even if I exclude all the adults under the excuse that they were somehow connected to Israel, to Hezbollah, what about our children? And please forgive me, I'm vulnerable, I'm emotional, but I'm angry. I'm angry about the United States reporting about Lebanon and the United States ignoring Lebanon, knowing that the Lebanese community is one of the founding Arab American communities in the United States and one of the largest. Not to mention that Lebanon is a founding member of the United Nations, especially the Human Rights Council. So simply put, what's happening is a disgrace, is a war crimes. And we as humans dedicated to human rights, we should make it our life mission to bring people to accountability and render justice to what happened. I can't hear
Your
you.
audio is off. Your audio, Samar, your technology.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You're mesmerized by this,
Professor,
by her
yes.
speech and her talk.
Because my mom's sister lives in Lebanon, and I had woken up yesterday and there are like 600 messages from my cousins and I have no idea what's going on. And then all of a sudden, my aunt is saying we are okay. So I said, why are you saying that? And then when I opened my Twitter account, I was like beyond myself because I had overslept yesterday. Anyways, Professor, I want to go back to the stage where there was a ceasefire. And I vividly remember seeing the tweet of the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the word Lebanon, that there will be a ceasefire between the US, Iran, and Lebanon. And all of a sudden, that tweet disappeared. And then also, the president, Trump, is saying, no, Lebanon was never part of this equation. Can you please clarify this particular important point? Because that's the justification that Israel is taking to say, no, this is not part of the ceasefire.
A few things to say here. First, there was a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah back in 2024 that Israel itself never abided by. There were over 1,000 attacks in that period of time from November 2024 till basically March 2026, where Israel kept claiming that Hezbollah is not being disarmed fast enough, is not being disarmed at all. So the arguments kept shifting. Meanwhile, Israel, as a country, kept bombing Lebanon, over 1,000 recorded attack in a span of a year. And the state of Lebanon kept saying during that period of time that we're willing to come to the table of negotiations unconditionally. Today, I'm not surprised that there was initially an idea that Lebanon was included in the ceasefire and excluded. First of all, it speaks volume to the lawlessness we are witnessing, whether from the state of Iran, the state of Israel, and the United States of America as a state. We're governed by three far-right regimes, totalitarian regimes that have complete disregards to human rights and lack honesty. So I would not be surprised, of course, this has nothing to do with Pakistan, but I would not be surprised if they keep pinpointing to each other about whether it is included or not. We're talking about, frankly, three liars. Second of all, Israel has set the tone for what it wants to do, irrespective of what any other country wants to say, irrespective of what the United States wants to say, the Security Council wants to say, the United Nations General Assembly wants to say, the EU wants to say. So even if Pakistan had clearly and loudly had said ceasefire includes Lebanon, it is naive to think that Israel will listen to anyone, considering the fact that right now it's a golden opportunity for Israel to occupy and annex South Lebanon as per the Zionist early movement. As it's a century-old movement that called for the occupation of South Lebanon from the Litani River to all of Palestine. So whether it was included or not, for me, it's all rhetorical. They're discussing this between themselves. Meanwhile, we have children in the streets. Over 450,000 children, Lebanese children, are displaced. No access to healthcare, water, food, education, and so on. But point being is, we should not be naive to listen to three liars. That's what I think.
What the media are saying, whether in the Zionist entity or in the US and some Western, is that we are targeting Hezbollah posts. We are just hitting, they used to be hitting an area in Beirut, in the capital called Dahya, but from where my aunt is living, that's, I mean, her building has Christians, has Druze, has Shia, has Sunni. My aunt herself is not even Lebanese. She's Palestinian, married to Iraqi. So this excuse that it's as if killing the pharmacist who is a Shia and happens to be working in that area, or the delivery man who is an atheist and passes through this area. So this excuse that they are doing these things because it's a Shia or it's a Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a new phenomena in the long history of Lebanon. Isn't that correct? Can you address that? Like, it's not, the first time I heard of Lebanon, there was nothing called Hezbollah. There were Druze, Shia, Sunni, Christian, Maronites, Catholics, Jews. But this idea of Hezbollah is a new phenomenon, isn't it?
So it's a great question. Lebanon, as we know, has 18 religious communities. And today, if I want to think about, although we don't have a formal census for Lebanon for a while now, we can say that 30% of the population is Shia, 30% is Christian, 30% is Sunni, and you have 10% that are of different religious backgrounds, such as the Baha'is, such as the Jewish community, and so on and so forth. The creation of Hezbollah, and full disclosure, all my writing are against everything. I stand for human rights and human dignity for all. But it is foolish to think that Hezbollah pre-existed Israel. As a matter of fact, in 1978, Israel occupied South Lebanon, invaded and occupied South Lebanon. In 1982, Israel imposed a siege on Beirut and killed over 19,000 civilians, Palestinians and Lebanese included. And it's as a reaction to the dispossession of the Shiite community in South Lebanon, simultaneously with the rise of a conservative Shiism in the Iranian, the Iranian Shah, and then the Iranian regime, that Hezbollah was born. Hezbollah was born officially in 1985 as a response to the marginalization of the Shia community in a predominantly Sunni world, as a response to the Israeli occupation, as a response to the Palestinian cause, and as a response also to the massacres that happened in Lebanon. This is absolutely not to justify the crimes that Hezbollah has committed inside Lebanon and outside Lebanon, but it is to say that the argument that Israel is occupying Lebanon to get rid of Hezbollah is simply too simplistic to be believed in. There are numerous reasons why Israel is occupying or plans to occupy Lebanon. Now, as Hezbollah in the history of Lebanon, a new phenomena, it's the problem is that Hezbollah has attempted doing since precisely 1990, when it stopped being just a military, paramilitary group and entered the political life. It has tried to spread the Iranian regime into Lebanon through Iraq, Syria, and up to Lebanon. And this form of Iranization of Lebanon is the new phenomenon. It does not look like us. We are a diverse, religiously diverse community. And you're absolutely right. Nowhere in Lebanon you have one religious community. We're all mixed. We're all living together. Like you mentioned, you have people that you know that are from different religious communities. Same here. And as a matter of fact, my own family is a mixed religious family. But the phenomena of the far-right Shiism and the Iranization of Lebanon is absolutely true. And it started in the 1990s.
When you talk about Israel interested in Lebanon and taking South Lebanon, I remember many, many years ago when I was studying at the American University in Cairo, I did a paper on water resources and water wars in the Arab world. And I remember reading the memoirs of Musa Sharet, and he was a prime minister of Israel. And I think in the 1950s, he mentions that part of the plan to secure water is to take the Litani River from Lebanon. But I think you just published an article. I don't have the name of it at the moment, but you said that it predates Musa Sharet. Can you address why this interest in Lebanon? Is it true, like what I read in the memoirs of Musa Sharet, that it's about water?
There's more than this. Like there is the religious conservatism that views the region surrounding not just Lebanon as a God-given land to the Jewish people, and that includes Lebanon, Syria. It expands to Iraq, to even Saudi Arabia. So there is that part. There is that conservative part. There is the part of secular Zionism that considers that for the Jewish people or the Zionist people to feel safe in Israel, they should contemplate what they call the natural borders of Greater Israel. And for them, the natural border is not just where the border of Palestine stopped. And full disclosure, the borders of mandatory Palestine was decided back then in 1923. So it was decided that Great Britain is going to colonize Palestine in what the borders are today in 1923. However, Israel never declared its land borders because there was always the desire to expand further north, for which what it considered its natural border in the Litani River. So one, there is the religious argument. Two, there's the geographical argument that the Litani River is geographically a natural borders. Three, the water argument is spot on. We know that Israel has a huge issue with water scarcity. They are building water plants to desalinate their waters, but nevertheless, the water remains an issue, especially with the expansion of illegal settlements in the West Bank. And as we know, there's going to be more, and I would not be surprised if the West Bank is annexed sometime soon. And in order to respond to the immediate need of illegal settlement, Israel needs to seize natural resources, and the Litani River seems to be the natural answer to that. So it's not. This is to emphasize that this is not just about safety and ending war. This is about land grab, water resources grab. And I would like to add another thing. A few years ago, Lebanon and Israel had signed an agreement that was brokered by the United States on the maritime borders. And this is extremely important because we discovered that in the Mediterranean Sea, in the maritime borders of Lebanon, of Israel and Palestine, there's gas. And this war is motivated also by access to natural resources such as gas. And one of the huge reservoir of gas is not surprisingly facing Gaza. So it's not surprising for me at all that Israel is exterminating the Palestinian people to have access to gas, whether it's in Palestine or in Lebanon, but also to water. It's a war on many facets, including natural resources, no doubt.
Thanks again for being with us. Where are you based?
I am in Pennsylvania.
Okay. So, reading in your article, which was in a conversation, it was titled "The Israeli Threat to Occupy or Annex South Lebanon: Dust Off a Decades-Old Playbook," which they've been doing in Palestine and in Gaza. I mean, when I see some of the images that came out this week, you see some neighborhoods, they look like you're in Gaza. You know, you can't differentiate the amount of, and it seems like, something was infuriating, like you were saying, that the mainstream media, the New York Times, like today, in their headline I saw saying something like Lebanon experienced the biggest toll, but it doesn't say like death toll. Like they removed even the word death toll. So it's toll, like, is this a toll for a bridge or a tunnel, or what kind of toll are you talking about? Greatly minimizing the massacres that Israel's been doing, like now since 2003, and the events of October 2023, October 7th, is that they've just been going on a rampage, like daily attacks, daily massacres. And now attention is shifting. Now that there's nothing else to bomb in the infrastructure in Gaza, it seems like they're turning their attention to do the same thing in southern Lebanon. And people are just watching it happen. But can you, because a lot of times they just dismiss, oh, this is Netanyahu. And a lot of even the Democrats here in America will say, well, we're for Israel, but we're against Netanyahu. It's Netanyahu. Netanyahu's a problem. Let's get rid of Netanyahu. As if once you get rid of this crazy guy, everything else is going to be okay, and Israel is just going to reach. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, you kind of froze for a minute, but did you hear my question?
You first for me, so I didn't hear the end of the question. So there's this democratic discourse that, that it's just Netanyahu that's the problem, correct?
Yeah, that's just Netanyahu is a problem, and somehow if he goes away, that everything's going to return to normal in Israel. And then, so weighing in more on, like they dismiss him and Ben Gavir and others, that they're somehow the fringe, that they're the religious nut jobs. But in your article, you're basically saying whether they're the religious community or the religious fanatics or the secular, they're all fanatics and they all want this expansionism and ethnic cleansing.
I don't know if it's freezing on my end or yours, but I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. So go ahead.
Okay, fantastic. So for me, I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. It was just I thought I was muted. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, it was.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Please.
Okay. So a couple of things. So for the democratic discourse, let's just start here. I think in the United States, the average American has no idea what the Israel-Palestine conflict is. I think the average American barely can pinpoint where the Middle East is on a map, let alone where Gaza is on a map. And of course, medias in the United States, they're politicized, and so they show what what the message is that. I'll turn off my camera. Sorry. So As I was saying, so the average American does not know what the Palestine-Israel conflict is about, and they, let alone being able to pinpoint Gaza on a map, or Lebanon, as a matter of fact, on a map. So there is that. So, of course, and the message that is spread by mainstream media, whether on the right or the left, is that Arabs are always a terrorist and are always unworthy, and Israel is always the victim. Now, I want to be clear. I oppose any attack to civilians. So I'm also opposed to the atrocities of October 7. Having said that, people in the United States woke up as if October 7 happened in a vacuum, as if there has been no occupation from 1948 and ongoing in Gaza, in West Bank and East Jerusalem, and so on. Violation of human rights do not happen out of nowhere. They happen because there have been a space where a violation of human rights has been bred and accepted, and so on. So one point there is the ignorance of Gaza, Palestine in the United States. The second point is that the narrative that is being told, we Arab and Muslim community have no say in it. Other people are telling our stories, and no, we are not being able to tell ours. Just to give you an example, if you think of any major news outlet that have analysts on their platform speaking of the Middle East, such as CNN or Fox News or MSNBC, it's typically a white man speaking, rarely ever someone from the Middle East or specialized in the Middle East. So we're not even in control of our own narrative. Three, there's a long history in the United States of Orientalism. And by Orientalism, it's not innocent. It's a narrative that tells American viewers, American audience, American readers that Arabs are terrorists, Arabs are scary, Arabs are unworthy of life. So of course, we in the United States have normalized racism against us. So as such, news outlets say Russia killed Ukrainians, but the same news outlets say 3 Palestinian children were found dead. It's the passive voice, because they don't even dare point out who is our killer, because precisely we are unworthy of empathy. We are unworthy of love. We are unworthy of support. We as Arab and Muslims in the United States are fighting against a huge machine that has dehumanized us for a long time. By ignorance, by lack of education, by intention, by news media narrative, and so on. And quite frankly, we are at fault as well, too, as Arab and Muslims, because we have racialized Islam and excluded Arab voices that are worthy to listen to. Whenever we think of Palestine, we talk about Palestine as a Muslim question. Palestine is a human rights question, and there are tons of Christians in Palestine, and they're enduring occupations just like their brothers and sisters who are Muslim. So also, we are inconsistent in our own narrative, and that also contributes to news outlets and to the Democrat to dismiss us. Finally, I'll say this. The Democratic Party, there are tons of donors to Democratic candidates, including AIPAC. Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, they all get money from these foundations, and they have to package their narrative in a certain way. I'm not surprised that Kamala Harris, did not win the election. Tons of Arab American and Muslims in Michigan refused to vote for her. She ignored them. She didn't even go to that state. More importantly, she denied the right for a Palestinian pediatrician to speak on her platform, all while giving access to an Israeli family to speak. So all of this contributes to the narrative that we Arab and Muslims of the United States, we are forever foreigners. We don't belong. We are always terrorists, and it is okay to dehumanize us. But no more. The reason why I'm saying no more is because we have upcoming elections. Unless the candidates specifically recognize the war crimes and genocide happening in our part of the world, most Arabs and Muslims will not vote. And I'll give you an example. A couple of days ago, Cory Booker refused to call Netanyahu a war criminal. I do not think that any Arab or Muslim is happy with that statement by Cory Booker. And quite frankly, I don't care if he is a black African-American man. I don't care that he's from a marginalized group. If he's not strong enough to say these are crimes, then I will not vote for him.
Thank you for sharing your comments. I think Kamala Harris did, just correction, she did visit Michigan during the campaign, but she did
Oh,
not
it's
sit
okay.
with Arab American leaders. And when she did, when
Right.
she tried to push back or try to fix the situation, she sent lower level staff to try to deal with leaders in Michigan. A lot of
Correct.
people,
Right.
that's a whole different conversation. 'Cause some people now within the Democratic leadership or Democratic establishment will say, well, you got what you wish for, and they blame the Arabs somehow and the Arab voters that they were the reason Trump came into office. And oftentimes the Democratic Party will rely on that somehow, to scare people from Trump, that's somehow enough. Like, hey, well, we're not Trump, you better vote for us. But right now, during this genocide, during the war, the Democratic leadership was not stopping the war. They were not speaking out against it. The majority of them were either staying quiet. Some, like Schumer and others, were actually, looking to fund the war some more. So there's still, even within a lot of elements within the Democratic Party that were on board with what was happening in Iran and are still on board with what's happening in Lebanon. There are not enough people are speaking out within either party. In fact, you have more people on the, I don't know if it's more, but more vocal within the Republicans, at least MAGA, that are speaking out against Trump and his wars in Iran and bombing in Lebanon than you have on the Democratic side as far as the establishment is concerned. So we're definitely in strange times, but I know it, and a lot of times our show gets a lot of heat saying, oh, well, you're focused too much on Israel. This must be anti-Semitism. And we try to tell people, how do you deal with criticism that you're able, to criticize Israel and what they're doing and their war crimes, and at the same time avoid or try to get away from this attacks that they always want to silence Arabs and Muslims and others that criticize Israel, that you're anti-Semitic?
First of all, a great question. I have multiple, bullet points here to answer this. Our biggest allies in the fight for humanity, human rights, and dignity for all are actually our Jewish brothers and sisters. And I cannot emphasize this enough. If there's anyone who's very vocal about Palestine and Lebanon right now, it's Bernie Sanders. And he is a role model to all of us as a progressive Democrat, but also as someone who's proud of his Jewish faith. And he is not afraid of criticizing Israel. So I follow Bernie Sanders and his criticism of Israel. If he's capable of doing it with grace, dignity, that does not offend religious sensitivities, then we should do the same. Second, I'm critical of the government of Saudi Arabia. So why shouldn't I be critical of the government of Israel? Because just because one is Muslim and the other is Jewish, I do not see people's faith as a hindering to criticize political action. The state of Israel is predominantly Jewish. Great. Does this mean that they're above political criticism, international law criticism? Absolutely not. And I believe that anti-Semitism is definitely real. Arabophobia, Islamophobia are definitely real. But criticizing a state for its practices and criticizing a state for its violation of international law are not anti-Semitic. And on the last point, I'd like to add that we Arabs, not all Muslims, Arabs, we are also Semite. We are the sons and daughters of Abraham as well. And that is being hijacked and forbidden and, taken away from us. So it's equally anti-Semitic to be bombing Palestinian children. It's equally anti-Semitic to be bombing Lebanese children because we are also Semite. So for me, the weaponization of anti-Semitism is a strategy that is done to intimidate. And I am done being intimidated. I am done.
Well, yeah, and what's also is can be frustrating, obviously, for Arab, is that a lot of times accusations of anti-Semitism is coming from non-Semites, like people who consider Netanyahu himself is not Semitic. These are people who are white from Europe who later on converted, or somebody in their lineage or predecessors converted to Judaism, but they're not ethnically Semites. They're not from the children or the tribes of Israel or Abraham. They're people that came from Eastern Europe and then even, changed their name to sound more Arab. Yes, there are Arabs who are indigenous, Jewish people who are indigenous to and are Semitic, like whether it's
Right.
the Mizrahis or other
Yeah.
communities that are Jewish. People, in Yemen that came from Yemen and from the region, but definitely the white European, Ashkenazi, Eastern European bloc, they're not Semitic, but somehow they've been able to reframe the language, redefine it as that they're the Semites and the Arab are somehow these foreign monsters that don't belong on their own land, which is crazy. But I want to turn it over to Samar. I think she has some questions.
Yeah, actually, I want to go back to what you were saying, Professor, about, talking about Democrats. Don't you notice that, I'm so much following Twitter or X, and so many young people running for election from the Democratic Party. And actually, there are maybe one or two from the Republican, and they are MAGA, and they are all saying very bluntly, we will not take money from AIPAC. Do you think that this is a new trend and it has to do with what happened in Gaza and maybe now even more what is happening with the war on Iran and Lebanon? Do you see a shift among young people, even from the Democratic Party? I'm not talking about statistics, whether they support or not. I'm talking about actually running for election and bluntly saying we will not take from AIPAC any money and showing evidence of that and publicly saying it, which maybe a few years ago that was a death sentence for anyone running for election.
Right, absolutely, and there's definitely a shift in how the world sees Israel and how the world sees Palestine. And Gaza was eye-opening. Unfortunately, it took us up to 70,000 people killed, and 17,000 of them are children, for the world to open its eyes. Now, I want to also caution us against applauding these MAGA people or the right-wing people who are opposed to what Trump and J.D. Vance are doing in Gaza, because also they have their own agenda. And quite frankly, it's often fueled by anti-Semitism as well. So it's interesting because you have people who are definitely becoming aware of the human the lack of humanity and the oppression of the Palestinian people, and all power to those people. But also, on the other hand, you have people who are speaking against AIPAC and against Israel just out of anti-Semitism. And you have people who are the national Christian conservative who want to kill everybody there so that Christ can come back. Again, I don't have statistics, but the answer to this remains the same, that they're all kind of criticizing AIPAC and its funding because they all have different agendas.
I think we have just a minute to go. Professor, could you speculate if you can? Do you think this ceasefire will hold? I know it's
in my heart, I'm praying God for every Lebanese child, every Palestinian child, that it holds. But concretely, we are facing 3 madmen. I don't think it will.
Oh God! And with Lebanon, do you see any way out? I mean, I haven't been following the news in the past couple of hours. Any development in Lebanon going on?
The Prime Minister of Lebanon, who is Nawaf Salam, who was the former head of the International Court of Justice, a very well-respected name in the world of international law, he's working tirelessly to, one, assert Lebanon's sovereignty and ensuring that Lebanon and only Lebanon speaks in its name, not Iran, not Israel. And he just put out a statement about that. But also, there are more and more calls that Lebanon should be a neutral country and should sign peace with Israel, and a border agreement, a land border agreement. And quite honestly, these are not, I don't think they're stemmed from a cowardly position. I think they are stemmed from a existential crisis. So that's where it is. It's an existential crisis at this point.
Thank you, Professor
Thank you for having
Rabiz,
me.
for being on. Hope to have you back on again. Insightful conversation. We'll be at this here back next Thursday, same time, same place at 12 o'clock on WMNF. The Scoop News is going to be next. Have a great weekend, everyone. And we hope that people will be safe in Lebanon and in Iran and all these places. We have to remember that what we do here has an impact. Our tax dollars has an impact on the rest of the world. And, and our votes do matter. And, who's in charge. So we can't just ignore what these politicians are doing in our name. Have a great weekend. Again, the Scoop News is next. And thanks for joining us. This is WMNF Tampa.